Thank you. I've been waiting 13 years for the timer to break, so there'd be no limit. A couple of sort of technical observations before I get to broader questions. One is, as you know, the DDX is in the design stage, and the concern from the point of view of the shipyards, both in Bath and in Mississippi, is that there be a smooth transition between DDG 51 and DDX. What concerns us is a timing trough, because you can't turn on and turn off welders. And so I hope that as you plan out the transition process, that's top of mind, because it would be disastrous for the yards if they couldn't, if there was a lag in demand between the two ships. Doctor, you're with me on that one?
Yeah, I am. So we saw the lessons from DDG 51 to DDG 1000 back in the day, and how some of that worked out. We clearly are going to be intentional about the transition of DDG 51 to DDGX to keep the production line hot, to then feather in DDGX, and then only taper out DDG 51 once DDGX is up and
Delighted
running.
to hear that. Keep that in mind.
Yeah, we'll do.
Second point on this developing DDX, Ingalls and General Dynamics are working together on the design, which is a new approach, but it's an important one, and I hope the Navy will continue to iterate with them, because having the build yards be involved in the design will make a big difference in terms of construction, learning curve, and all those kinds of things. So I hope that project, which is underway, will be maintained, and the Navy will be forthcoming in terms of communication with the two yards.
Yeah, just to comment on that, I think I see that as a great opportunity, and we're working with them even before preliminary design phase, and it gets to some of the things that you've talked about, Ms. Oakley, that we need to be doing. So excited, and we'll be all about it.
Well, having served on this committee for a while, it strikes me that one of the problems we have is requirements creep. At some point, it has to be pencils down. And if you learn anything from the Ford, it's that doing research while you're building a ship is not the way to go. So I think, again, that's as we move toward DDX, we need to say, okay, here's the requirements, here's the design, and let's build it, not let's iterate the design as we're moving through the construction process. That's what's really messed us up in some of these major overrun projects. If I were going to list the three biggest problems right now in developing shipyard capacity, the first would be workforce, the second would be workforce, and the third would be workforce. And the Navy has to be thinking in unconventional ways. For example, one of the most important things that can be done to develop workforce is to have childcare facilities, parking, the kinds of things that housing in the area. We've had people recruited to Bath who get there and then they can't find a place to live. And so I believe that has to be part of the mentality of developing workforce. And then, of course, training and all the details that go to attracting people in this economy. And finally, on the development of the infrastructure, it is the infrastructure itself. There has to be investment. It has to be a joint investment between the private shipyards and the Navy in terms of infrastructure, buildings, more efficient layout of the facility, and those kinds of steps I think are very, very important. So again, I'm giving you advice, but this is based on my experiences working with these shipyards. And I guess I would reiterate, I wanted to my final question is to GAO. You mentioned 60 or so recommendations that haven't been followed. What are the top three that if you were pressed, what are the top three recommendations that haven't been followed that you think would make a difference?
You're really pressing my memory on 60 recommendations, but I think most pressing in the front of my mind are our recommendations related to design and the changes that we'd like to see the Navy make with regard to, like you said, ensuring that the design is finalized before we're awarding a contract for construction and before we're starting to bend metal. Because the problems arise when those design changes start creeping in as the pressures of a fixed price contract begin to mount. And then that leads to just challenges overall, and it's just exactly what we're seeing with the frigate program. And so we made recommendations to the Navy that they ensure that they have matured their basic and functional design before awarding the contract for detailed design and construction. Another recommendation that we made was related to ensuring that detailed design on each individual block is finished before you begin construction on that block. Most of those recommendations are really aimed at ensuring that there's less of a likelihood that these surprises will pop up at a time where the pressure is going to be high to continue to proceed because of, schedule or money challenges.
Well, I think this goes without saying, and I appreciate those. Modularity is king at this point. So we're building 40-year assets here. They ought to be constructed in such a way that they can be upgraded easily without ripping the whole platform apart. So I hope those are some things. The other thing that is something that I've observed is when we're buying these major objects, we should also buy the IP so that every ship can have its own 3D printer. And we don't have ships in port for an inordinate amounts of time waiting for a part. So I hope that's in your planning as well, because in this day and age, and by the way, I think the same thing about the Air Force. Availability is a big issue in our fleet, and we should improve our availability. We should benchmark against Carnival Cruise Lines, because if they were only available 40 or 50% of the time, they'd be out of business. So to the extent we can have intellectual property as part of the purchase, then you have the right to make the parts as necessary without even having necessarily to go back into port. Thank you.